It's been one of those weeks for me. I've been super busy, but I've also had the chance to buy a couple of cool pieces of gear that I've always wanted. They've popped up really cheap, and yeah, I've lucked out. And this week, the creme de la creme of the gear purchase is this. It's a Mesa Stereo 250 power amp. I have always wanted one of these. I've always wanted a rack power amp ever since I've been into rack gear. They were just really hard to find and really expensive when I was younger, when I was kind of acquiring all this stuff, when I sort of went through the whole 80s hair metal phase, which I'm still kind of in, and buying the old rack preamps like the ADA and the JMP1 and the Rocktron and the PV and stuff like that. I always just have run them into the effects return of my heads, but now I've got a standalone stereo tube amplifier, and I'm just going to kind of rejig the rack a little bit. This is not something I would ever take out to play at a show. This just lives in the studio, and I essentially want to make it convenient to use. So I've got this Rocktron patch mate that I'm going to patch all the preamps into, and maybe the effects processors as well. I've got a Rocktron Replifex and a Rocktron IntelliFX. I'll probably just use the IntelliFX. And yeah, I mean, most of the time I'd probably just use this for recording anyway, so I'd be miking an amp and then applying effects in post. But I'm going to pull this old Digi003 out because it's just taking out space in the rack. I've got a patch bay that might come out, and I've got our bass player's Mark Bass 2-rack unit head, which I may or may not pull out. I'll see how we go. But yeah, have a look at this, because this is the back of the rack, and all you kind of studio guys and rack guys out there, I apologize because this is not pretty. Well, it's not as bad as it could be. First things first, I mean, there's 4 big glass bottles here, which is really nice, but I'll give you a close-up actually. Let's take this off the tripod and flick that over. So, I mean, that's not the best view you're ever going to get. There you go. I've tried to kind of keep things clean in there. This isn't like a sort of Dave Friedman or Bob Bradshaw kind of gig, but yeah, the patch mate, there's a bunch of patch cables, and it's all running off this one power strip, which is a little bit dodgy, but for what I'm doing, it does the trick. This isn't something, as I said, I'm going to be playing out, so I'm going to move a few things around and show you guys a bit of the process and talk about the thought process behind it and get my studio rack in better shape. Something I would really recommend is, if you're building a studio rack and you're assembling and disassembling stuff, just lay it on its side, because then that way you don't have to worry about trying to like hold units up with your hand and stuff like that. Very simple ergonomic thing. It just makes it so much easier, and you can kind of hurt your wrists and stuff like that, and get things pinched otherwise. So if you're a guitar player especially, you don't want to do that stuff. So the 003 is going to come out, the patch bay is going to come out. I've got this sort of patch panel, which isn't a full rack space, but I've got the connectors in it that kind of just slots in. So I want to get a patch panel for this as well. That'll make things a lot easier. Yeah, let's just move some things around and clean it up a little bit. Right, I got all the junk out. As you can see, it's all upside down, but this purple thing here is a clone of a Soldano SLO lead channel, which is pretty cool, made by Miasnikov. I think I said that right, always say it wrong, probably said it wrong. Made in Russia, which is pretty cool. Then a classic old ADA MP1, PV Rockmaster, which is pretty cool, Rocktron Piranha, I've got a Marshall JMP1, and then I've got the Patchmate, the IntelliFX, and the Replifex are down there. What I'm going to do before I do anything else is pull all these cables out, and then I'm going to go through with some contact cleaner and basically go through and spray every possible electrical connection, and then I'll probably move a bit of this stuff around. We'll see how we go. But that is something I'm not going to film. We'll be back real soon. Alright, so I've put a lot of the cables out. I'm yet to move this stuff around, but what I'm going to do is put the power amp in the rack. I'm just going to attach it with 2 screws because it's sitting on the bottom, so nothing really has to hold it up, and in that way, if I want to pull the power amp in and out to do other stuff with it, that makes it pretty easy. What I'm using are these rubber washers. There we go. on the back of the screws, so where the rack ear touches the actual piece of metal, hopefully to avoid any grounding problems. I'm sure there's going to be some ground hum issues with this that I'll have to solve, but that's a good first place to start. Try to isolate all those connections. So they'll go on there, and then the rack will sit in. And it's super easy to do it like this, which is really nice. So you can go there, and we'll hopefully, carefully, jinx, place it in. So well, that was no good, it immediately slipped, so I should be a little bit more prepared for this, I guess. Where's my screwdriver? Shocking workflow. Very, very disappointed in myself. Alright, I'm going to find my screwdriver and put this thing in. Idiot, there it is. Alright, where did my washer go? It's one of those days. Okay, so a little problem I've run into is the rack is actually angled, so I can't place this on the very bottom of it. It'll have to be one rung up, so there'll be a blank rack space at the bottom, which might not necessarily be a bad thing. Maybe it'll promote some extra airflow or something, because this does have a fan and 4 vacuum tubes in there, so it's bound to get hot. So I'll just move that around now. And there we have it, all wired up. I've got the Mark bass sitting at the top. I guess if I ever need to record bass, I can just plug that in and connect it to a speaker cab. So that's kind of handy, but mostly it just looks good at the top there. Then I've got a tuner, then the Soldano clone, the MP1, the Rockmaster, the Piranha, the JMP1, and the Patchmate. I didn't end up moving them at all. I managed to fit everything around it. I've got a little patch panel down here, which I still need to wire in properly. Then the IntelliFX or Replifex, and right down at the bottom I've got the power amp. So yeah, there's only one thing left to do, and that is make some noise with this thing. I'll go through each of the different pre's, and I'll chuck some panning delay on with the IntelliFX.